Welcome to the day after Saturday. I'm your co-host, Jackson Juzang.
I'm your other co-host, Chris Gupta.
We have our first main guest of season three. First two main guests of season three, I should say. I'm really appreciative of you guys coming in. We have the founder of the Neighborhood Film Company, a award-winning director, filmmaker, and producer based out of Los Angeles, who has a Pittsburgh connection. Go Steelers. Most notably, the director of The Concrete Cowboy. And we also have, AKA the Concrete Cowgirl, who's the executive director of the Philadelphia Urban Riding Academy, Miss Erin Brown and Ricky Staub. We're really appreciative of you guys joining the show.
Excited to be here, guys. Me.
Good stuff.
Thanks you guys so much for joining. And as we say here, if you're not familiar with the Day After Saturday podcast, the best place to start is the beginning.
Our
first question is here. It's for you, Ricky. What first drew you into filmmaking, and how did those early years with Sam Mercer and M. Night Shyamalan shape that?
It's a good question. I have wanted to make movies pretty much since I can remember. You know, I wrote my first full-length script when I was 10 years old, like a legit typed out script. They barely had computers back then. But my dad had grabbed me one from, my dad ran hotels, and he grabbed this old computer for me. And I had a couple aunts that worked in the industry that sent me scripts just because I loved reading them, and that's how I learned how to write them. And then ironically, I actually did not study filmmaking, but it was pretty much halfway through college is when I got back on the writing bug and realized that's really what I wanted to do. And so I realized pretty quickly that it stunk to sit around and wait for people to make your scripts. So then I just started being a production assistant on any set anyone would let me on, starting in college. And so about a year or two after college, I was working as a production assistant, and I eventually met Sam Mercer. I got recommended by two different people. He was looking for an assistant that would work for him in LA and travel with him to Philly because he was M. Night Shyamalan's main producer. He did Night's first 7 films. So that is one of the interviews that pretty much changed my life. I remember I was living in Marina Del Rey in LA. I was a server, like most of the people that worked in the film industry. And I sat down with Sam Mercer, who, if people don't know him listening to this, he was pretty much one of the most preeminent line producers in the industry. So I was quite nervous, but I went and met with him at his office. We sat there for about 30, 40 minutes. And at the end, he's like, "Great. Can you start Monday?" And I was like, "Yes." And I remember I went back to my car and I literally sobbed my eyes out. I was so excited. One, because I knew I didn't have to be a server anymore. And two, I just knew that working for this man would be a life-changing experience, which it was. So I credit him to pretty much teaching me everything I know about how to actually make movies.
That's amazing. And how old were you when you had this interview?
Oh gosh, I'd have to go back. I gotta be, 23, 24 years old.
Wow. So that's incredible, man. Well, what was the turning point in your filmmaking career, I guess I should say, that you felt like the biggest picture was how can film serve a bigger purpose, leading to the Neighborhood Film Company and its reentry mission?
Yeah, that came actually when I was working for Sam in Philadelphia. So I came on at the end of The Happening, one of Night's movies. And then I went to Philadelphia to work on The Last Airbender, where I was literally working on location for 2.5 years. And it was during that time when I'd say the idea for the company hit me. The short of it is I met this guy named Will who was homeless, and I learned about that he had a pretty extensive incarceration record, and he was facing, he had violated his parole because he was caught sleeping in an abandoned building to get out of the cold. And so I remember sitting with him. We would meet every Saturday for months and just share a meal, and him telling me, how he's taking all these resume building classes and trying to get his life right. But I just remember thinking, like, no matter what this guy does, he's never going to compete with me in the working world. And to me, it was actually I can't speak to anything outside of it being a movement of my faith. Like, I feel like the Lord gave me an entire vision for the company. I can try to sit here and tell you I was strategic and had visions for running a company, but I for sure never did. I was working in my dream job for one of the best producers in the world and had no reason to doubt that that should have been the path I stayed on. But the longer and the more that I ingratiated myself into a community of people struggling with poverty and homelessness, I realized I was standing at the base of a mountain of problems with our incarceration system. And I felt like the Lord gave me a vision on how to do it, which actually was through Sam. You know, when I got hired from Sam, I never filled out a resume. I've literally to this day have never made a resume. I don't even know what to put on it. I always just got recommended from one person to the next, kept getting hired even to that point. And I thought, man, if I could train someone like Sam trained me to be, if I could train someone to be as good as me at their job, and then I could recommend them and no one ever knew they were incarcerated, then maybe that work could actually change the entire trajectory of their life. So, you know, this is 2009. I'm having these ideas. So by 2011, I quit my job to start Neighborhood, so that with a mission to hire people who are formerly incarcerated, specifically in film production, and then use those skills to get them employment in pretty much any category they want.
And how has that been, like, I guess, expanding out to other cities outside of Philadelphia, if you have done that in any capacity? I think Philadelphia is one of the better cities, I guess, for your cause due to the mass incarceration rates in Philly. And then also, I think just the systemic issues with racism or with, you know, class, socioeconomic structure. But has there been any other cities you've ventured in that you've also found appreciation in doing the same work?
Not really. I mean, not that I'm doing work that's like entirely unique. There are other companies that are working at it at different fashions. You know, we've met with other companies to try to deploy apprenticeships, is the term we give it, to help train other companies. To date, only one other company has actually taken up the mantle and has been running their own apprenticeship for 7 or 8 years. It's an ad agency in Philadelphia called Athena Global, run by this incredible woman named Maggie, who learned what we did through the work we did with them, said, I want to do that, instituted it from the top down, and now they've been successfully hiring people through the same judges we work with in Philadelphia. But again, it's not something that our specific model, I would say, has been picked up by other companies in other cities.
Right. Well, I think that speaks to the specialty of what you're doing, man, you know, ethically and professionally. I think this is a great transition to Fletcher Street and what the Fletcher Street Urban Riding Club means. And how did that convince you to anchor a feature film for a place like that?
Well, it's actually tied to our mission. So I speak every year in court with these federal judges that we're partnered with that have a reentry program. And let's see, this would have been in 2017, I want to say, or 16. I was speaking in court, and this gentleman named Eric Miller had just come home for about a week and was telling the judge that he had already bought a horse, which I was like, if I had just gotten out of prison, it's probably not the first thing I would buy. I was familiar with the Cowboys up in North Philly because my office was less than a mile from them, so I would see them a lot. But I was also aware that they were a pretty like closed off community. Rightfully so. A lot of people have tried to like poach their stories or, you know, pay them a couple bucks to film them here and there. But we struck up a conversation with Eric, and he had actually been aware of a short film that I had just made called The Cage, where I used all North Philly residents as actors in the film. And it was part and parcel his idea and ours. I was like, listen, I think there's a great movie to be made about your community. And he's like, can it be something that slingshots us into saving the community? Because we're facing extinction this is the last stand up here at Fletcher Street. And so that's when we established the Philadelphia Urban Riding Academy, PURA, because at the time, there was actually no functioning nonprofit supporting that community. And so Eric was the executive director. We worked with him to write the script, build the movie. And then unfortunately, he was murdered a month before we started production on the film. And that's when Erin has been a part of that journey from the beginning. It was one of Eric's best friends. So she actually took over as executive director upon his passing, and she's done a remarkable job. And, you know, whatever, how many years after the movie, we're still working with the city to secure land, property, financing, and have firmly established with PURA that this is a community that can have a lasting legacy in the city, where before the city was just going to build apartments and condos over their land.
Right.
And no one would ever remember them. So very proud of what Eric helped us achieve. And to this day, can't even believe it actually worked. And it happened. And we got to make that movie, which was one of the more special summers of my life.
Right.
Yeah. Erin, can you talk a little bit about like taking the reins of that organization, just what your initial vision was and how that's worked out since then?
When it came to PURA, you know, as Ricky said, this was E's, Eric Miller. We called him E in the community for short. This was his thing. So he was quite secretive about what it was. It was just that he was, you know, building a barn to preserve this culture and legacy. So when he was scouting, or when they were scouting for the barn, I went to see one of the locations that it would potentially be built at. So not too many people knew of PURA or what it was. So after I got the call that, you know, Eric was murdered, I, you know, reached out to Ricky and Dan, or Ricky rather, on Instagram, and asked him to call me. I was getting ready. You know, I thought I had my dream job as well for the police department as the horse trainer. So, you know, right before production, and I believe it was like scouting for scenes in the movie, or I don't want to butcher it, whatever it's called, you know, Ricky said, so what are we going to do with PURA? You know, we don't have to talk about it right now, but, you know, we can come back after filming. And I told him, if I don't step up, he'll come back and haunt me, because I knew how important this was to him. And in my mind, I've had no vision of running a nonprofit. I've worked for plenty, and I've worked as a lead riding instructor and trainer for several facilities, but doing this was not something I ever planned or had a vision for, but I had an idea how to do it from, you know, my resume. And I remember asking or telling Ricky, like, I don't know what to do. And he said, the best thing to do for PURA is to act like it's already existing. And once I locked that in my brain, that this is already an existing thing, you know, it's a riding academy that's internationally known now. So
I love that, speaking into existence.
Manifestation is key on the path of faith, Miss Brown. Can you share a story of someone in the community whose journey shows what the Philadelphia Urban Riding Academy is truly about?
There are several. We all come from different walks of life, but Fletcher Street has become a melting pot of all of the different stables that were once in Philadelphia that are now gone to redevelopment and gentrification. So we all come from different neighborhoods. We're not all from North Philly. It's the power of the horse that keeps us locked in. So we're like this toxic, you know, scatterbrained family. at the end of the day within the horse community. But I think, you know, I can speak for myself growing up in this community in the early 90s. You know, I didn't have many friends growing up. I was shy. I used to stutter. People made fun of the way I talked, so I didn't talk. And, you know, I knew horses couldn't judge me, and they didn't care. And I used a horse, and I started competing on a professional circuit at 7 years old. So I used riding and competing as my voice. And in hindsight, I wasn't that great in school, but I knew if I didn't maintain a passing grade average, I couldn't ride. I couldn't compete. I couldn't go to the barn. That was the worst punishment. You could take the TV, you could take the phones. We didn't even have phones back then, but you could take the TV. I didn't care. But if you tell me I can't go to the barn, you know, I'm a sad kid. So I think we all have, and one thing I do notice about the community and people that have been incarcerated, like Eric, you know, you do your time, but everyone always wanders back to Fletcher Street. You get out of jail or they come right back to the barn. So I've had several of my peers growing up that have done the same thing. They do their jail time, and then the first stop is the barn. So it's transformative to so many of us.
It sounds like it's had just the most immense impact on your life, Ms. Brown, and I commend you for that. And I think the fact that, you know, any incarcerated individual feels like they can come back to that space and through horses. I mean, I've personally not had a lot of experiences with the horses. I don't think I've ridden one since I was 4 or 5. I mean, that was a long time ago now, but I'm in Philadelphia. I think I have to come and check it out for myself for sure. A question back to you, Ricky. I think speaking more to the film and kind of trying to, essentially take Hollywood actors like Idris Elba and Caleb McLaughlin and incorporate them into this North Philadelphia film with community members. What was your approach as a director and writer to do that?
Well, you know, before we had Idris and Caleb, the plan was to make the film with just the community. So we had done it once in the cage, and so our thought was, well, let's just do that again. But when you get the chance to meet Idris Elba and he wants to be in your movie, then you go, okay, we'll put Idris Elba in the movie. But the first conversation we had with him was like, look, we want to do it this way. We want half the cast probably to be real cowboys. And the trick is going to be, how do you actually fit into the community? So that it doesn't look like you're playing Halloween here. So a lot of that process was, and credit to Idris and Caleb and the other actors like Method Man, like they dove in, spent a lot of time. I mean, Erin will tell you, those guys, they sat on stoops, they sat around and did all kinds of stuff with these guys just to like become part of the community. There was not a lot of sitting in trailers. There was a lot of just sitting out there gabbing, getting to know people. I mean, it did feel like one long, for better or worse, block party all summer long. And so I think that really helped in terms of their performance, in terms of their dialect, how they speak, the terms they use. You know, something I always stressed to Idris was that the way that these folks ride horses isn't traditional. Like, you have to ride like they ride. You need to, you know, use the terms they use. And so he took that and ran with it. I mean, I think that's what made it an exceptional experience for those guys, to feel like they could fold into a community. And I know a lot of them still stay in touch. So yeah, the approach was really like, hey, bake yourself in, kind of like, you know, me and Dan is my partner. You know, we did that for years leading up to the film, just hanging out and spending time. And I think a lot of that comes through even in the way that the film, what's on screen and how it got there.
Yeah. And you mentioned sitting on the stoops. How long do you think it really took for Idris, Caleb, and Method Man to get acclimated more or less through the summer?
I mean, in some ways, like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It was those guys did a pretty good job of, especially I'd say Method Man. He was good at the shit talking.
Yeah, he's not too far from Philadelphia, so I think.
No.
Awesome. And with this, like, it's a really cool blend of cast. Something I'm always curious about with filmmakers is, do you guys get the sense that when you're building this thing that this is going to start attracting some attention, attracting some awards? Like, and obviously they came with for Concrete Cowboy, and you got some individual accolades as well. Like, where in the process did you start to feel like this thing could be huge?
It's a good question. I think there's certain scenes when we're filming them where you start to feel like, oh, there's a real like patina, there's a real texture that's unique here that we're getting. I think back to like the scene where they're sitting around the fire, and there's a couple cowboys in there that are older, that I had met, that were never a part of the writing process, that I had met while we were in prep, that I threw in there, singing the song and like telling, Choo Choo Charlie, telling an old tale about, like, I don't even think the guy knew that we were making a movie. Like, he was just spitting. And I remember our script supervisor was like, hey, this, like, where are these lines? Like, what is this? I'm like, no, none of this is in there. Like, we're basically shooting a documentary here. I think that's when, in watching, I told Caleb, I said, I need you to be truly like, you are the fish out of water here. You don't, like, ask these questions genuinely and just roll with it. Like, you're the spine here. And then with Idris, I mean, he even starts rapping at the end there. I mean, that was none of that scripted. That's just him like folding in with the community and having a good time. And, but that, I think, like, shooting a scene like that, you feel like, okay, there's a real spirit to the film that I think that really captured, like, an essence that I experienced the years leading up, sitting around a barrel with these guys.
Yeah. I think, again, I want to kind of spin back to your point earlier about your faith. And there was a Variety article that wrote that you're, not a faith-based filmmaker per se, but faith clearly guides your path. And I wanted to ask, how do those convictions shape the way, you choose projects that you work on to this day?
I mean, I think Concrete Cowboy is a good example of how, I guess, my faith dictates the decisions I make. I think there's just the obvious of, like, what's the film about?
Yeah.
Which people that share my faith may agree or disagree with. I mean, there's a lot of language in Concrete Cowboy, so I don't know how many churches are playing it across the country, but I'm okay with that. But I do think a lot about how projects are made, that I have to remember that everyone that shows up to work on one of my projects, this isn't their passion project. This is their job. They have families, husbands, wives, kids that they want to go back to, and to treat them as such. And to not ask more of people that I'm not willing to give, like, if I'm going to, but just to remember that for this specific amount of time, when I am blessed to get to make a movie, that in some ways that I can be either a good pastor or a bad pastor, because I am the leader. And so how I choose to treat people and care for people and be patient with people and push people is really important on how those people then do it. There's a trickle down effect. And working as an assistant to Sam and just on other sets, I've seen how there's a negative trickle effect too, to bad leaders. And so I always think about, what's the making of this film going to mean for the people involved? I think Concrete Cowboy is exceptional on every level, just because it was, over 100 community members. You think about the extras we hired, 11 of the 14 stunt people on that film, like, weren't stunt people before it became SAG stunt performers, hired within the community. Like, the amount of job movement that we poured into that community over the summer, many of those guys are actually still working in the industry now because of those opportunities. I look at that that's like, wow, this could be a really great experience that lives well beyond the film.
Yeah.
And just going back to how you sort of got involved in this, I was curious when we were talking about this, like your identity, like as a white filmmaker, how does that come to play? Like when you're coming into Philly and recording this like Black culture, like did you face any sort of uncertainty or criticism at any point, and just how do you deal with that?
No, actually, I didn't. I think when you ask the Cowboys, and Erin can even speak to this, I don't think the color of my skin ever became a question for them because it was the content of my character that was being judged. I spent time knowing Eric, spent time getting to know Erin. I've never once not been welcome down there because I was white. I think the only criticism that I've ever received is from people on the outside who have no idea what it means to ingratiate themselves in a community and love people that aren't like themselves.
Amen, bro.
So I've certainly faced that criticism because I made that film. But if pouring into a community and watching people from Hollywood and North Philly come together harmoniously and care for each other for a summer is wrong, then I'm guilty. But I would say that's the way that art should be made. And that I don't think either of you would want to make stories that are only about what you look like or what you've done. That's the point of art, is to be able to experience worlds and cultures and people well beyond us. And I think it's one of the most, I will look back on my life and say it was one of the best things I've ever done, which is get to know Erin, get to know Eric, that community of cowboys. Like, how exciting for me as a white guy who's not a Black cowboy, clearly, to have shared and written a love letter to a community that embraced me. So, it only becomes a question when I'm asked it.
Yeah, right. Well, a question for Miss Brown to wrap up my questions about the PURA, I guess you could abbreviate. Where do you hope to see PURA expand through the next 5 or 10 years long term?
Wow. I'm thinking about the 6 years it took to get here, and I feel like there's still a long road ahead. The vision for PURA is to, I'm heavily involved in the horse show world, still on a professional circuit.
Hence all the ribbons behind you.
And it was tough as a child to get to the top levels because we didn't have the top horses and we didn't have the top money. So now these horses are being bred at home, and they're top level, world class horses. They're some of the finest horses on the East Coast with these world titles. And my hope is to see not just Black and brown kids, but kids that just can't afford it be out on this professional circuit with horses that they've made and do the big things and know that they belong, regardless of where you live and what your financial situation is at home. That's no one's business. You come here, you're royalty, and you're dealing with horses that are royalty. And I just want that statement to be all across the horse show world. That's where I see, PURA that's one of the bigger things for PURA, other than the day-to-day things that it offers the inner city.
That's awesome. And I just say, like, a couple of years ago, last year, one of my political science classes, we got to visit a reentry court and just see, like, the updates that people are giving and things like that. And I think having something like PURA available is just like an amazing opportunity. And I think just how much, like, statistically recidivism decreases because of these reentry courts and having programs like this, I think they're just really cool to see.
Well, and Ricky, same sort of question. What do you feel like's next for you with your new films or initiatives, or expanding Philadelphia Urban Writing Academy's impact? If you can reveal anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of two different things, but they're all kind of collide in one. I mean, most of my work right now is on the writing side. So it's been an interesting journey figuring, okay, what does that look like if I'm not on set as much as I used to be when I did commercials per se, but also looking to go, okay, what does it mean? Now that I've proven or been able to make a film in the way that we made it, it's exciting to go the next time that we make one, how do we level up on that? How do we provide more opportunity for more people to get, on-set experience that may otherwise not have the access or the ability because of, in my case, an incarceration record, let's say. So I'm glad to, proudly, we're 15 years into a partnership with federal judges that kind of know what type of person we're looking for. As far as PURA is concerned, I'm really excited as we build out their permanent home. What that means, as Erin's being very modest, but she does have a lot of ribbons behind her, as you can see on even that can fit in the screen there.
Jeez, yeah.
Putting the PURA name on a map at a world-class level like that, like something that I always like with the work that I'm doing, what PURA is doing is it's not a charity-based mission. It is in a sense, but it's a merit-based, like she's showing the best. I want to make the best films. And I always say this to apprentices is you are going to be judged now, not on your conviction record. You're going to be judged now on how hard you work and on the quality of your work. So now you have every opportunity that anyone that came out of an Ivy League school has. I mean, you should see the amount of emails we get from people at USC or wherever.
Yeah.
And I'm giving someone who's formerly incarcerated, or Erin's giving someone who can't afford riding license to go, okay, the playing field has been set now. The excuses have been wiped clean. Let's just get to work. So I get excited for that. As the platform gets bigger, the opportunities just get better.
And if you could tell your 10-year-old self the first, as you're writing the first script you've ever wrote, what's one thing that you would tell yourself?
Also, what was that first movie about?
Yeah, what was that? What was the plot of the movie too? Yeah.
I can tell you guys that after. After I answer the question, I would just tell myself, which is something I'm telling myself now, is that the journey takes time. There's spikes. Like obviously, walking onto set the first day of making Concrete Cowboy was one of the most nerve-wracking, scary moments of my life. I'm looking at Idris Elba, McLaughlin, Jerome just got nominated for Emmy. I got Lee Daniels on set, Tucker Tooley, every who's who of who. It's like meeting that wall of I'm exiting potential. Like everyone could say, oh, you would make a great movie. I'm like, well, now you got to go make it.
Right.
And so I would tell my 10-year-old self, like, just be prepared. There's going to be spikes, but it's a long, patient road. There's a lot of boulder pushing. But the first script I ever wrote was called Half Soldiers. It was about these two kids that were probably, I think they were like my age, because I wanted to be in the movie too. That their parents get kidnapped and are in this like military base, and they break in and train in the attic to get ready, like take down the base and save their parents. It's like basically like a Spy Kids.
Oh yeah, watch that.
But
Definitely.
It was called Half Soldiers. I remember I pitched it to my aunt very seriously, and she told me it was cute. And I feel like I wore that chip on my shoulder for like 20 years.
I mean, if you pitched it to her now, maybe she'd have a different.
Yeah. She'd perk up a little bit.
Right.
That's awesome.
Well, no, you got it.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, are there any like dream actors that you would want to work with in the future?
Yes.
We're on the fun questions now.
Yeah.
No. one of my favorite actors who I've now gotten to meet with a couple times and is attached to a project that we wrote is Casey Affleck. So I'm hoping next year I actually get to make that movie with him. But I've learned that who knows what could happen, but so far, so good. But yeah, he's literally one of my favorite actors, and Dan and I have gotten to spend some time with him, and he's attached to this project. So I'm just, again, telling my 10-year-old self, just stay the course. Don't get.
Yeah. And there's two more contingent questions that are fun. So your favorite movie of all time and preferred location of watching a movie, if that's like a small theater or an IMAX or at home.
Oh yeah. My favorite movie is The Family Man with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah. Okay. Did you see the Charlie Sheen documentary and the documentation of Nick Cage in that?
My wife watched it and told me he's a crazy person. I'm not shocked, but I still think that movie is amazing. It's always been my favorite. I love Christmas movies. I love magical realism. I think the performance in there is great. And what was the other question then? Where do I like to watch?
Location, yeah.
One of my favorite, movie theaters, great. But I would say one of my actual favorite places to watch a movie is on an airplane. I don't know why. Something about the cocoon of the space. I don't know. It's just like I'm dialed in.
Yeah, the pressure of the airplane. You know, you got.
I know something about it now. Yeah. And now with these AirPods, it's like completely silent. It's such a good. I don't know.
Right. Well, that concludes the episode. Guys, we can't thank you enough for joining and giving information. Well, Miss Brown, I'd like for you to shout out for not maybe the college folks that don't know about the Philadelphia Urban Writing Academy, where they can find information on it if they want to contribute or join or just, know what it is.
Okay, our website is thepura.org, and we are Philadelphia Urban Writing Academy on Facebook and Instagram.
Awesome. We'll put the links below. Guys, thank you so much for joining the show. Tune in for more coverage. Peace.